everyone, welcome. Welcome to Brown Bag Lit. We are so happy that you're here. I'm Shasta Grant. Chloe Miller and I conceived of Brown Bag Lit late last year and started classes and readings in January of last year. Today, we are happy to welcome you to Writing Towards Complication, Tangled Relationships in Fiction and Nonfiction with Miriam Gershow and Stephanie Austin. Hopefully you have read their books. They are both really, really good. We hope to see you at future events starting next fall. We will be announcing our fall lineup later this summer. And throughout the summer and continuing in the fall, we will be hosting our lunch break writing accountability group. We meet on Wednesdays and would love to have you join us as a member. You can find all of our upcoming events on our website and recordings from earlier events on our YouTube channel and by following us on social media. And we'll be sure to put everything into the chat as well. Please make sure you stay muted during the reading. I recommend that you put the screen on speaker view during the reading and then gallery view during the Q&A. Please do open the chat to ask questions, follow along with links, and share anything you like about the conversation. And if you want to put your questions in as the conversation is ongoing, we will return to those questions at the end so that we can open the conversation to you. And we are really excited to have Miriam Gershow and Stephanie Austin here with us. And I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Miriam and I have had a discussion. So I'm going to kind of introduce, sort of talk about her a little bit, and then she's going to read. I am coming to you from between my classes that I'm teaching this summer. So that's why I'm back here with all the really lovely, really, really exciting backgrounds. Okay. So, and thank you again, Brown Bag Lit and Shasta and Chloe, for having both of us. I'm really excited. Miriam's book is just so great. It's like, it's not a slim volume necessarily, but it packs a punch. Like, this book is bigger than what it looks like. So, okay. So survival tips from Miriam Gershow. It's a very smart story collection. Very smart, about people trying desperately to say or do the thing that they need to say or do the most, but they can't. And it is inside their can't where they kind of mess it all up on the outside. So in Little Girl, which is the opening story, which is my personal favorite, and I wish I would have written it, to be honest, the young narrator kind of starts to live for the way that her friend's life falls apart, because something is sort of broken in her, but we don't know necessarily what that is. So she is very focused on all the breaking on the outside of the world, which I thought was amazing. And then in Big Home, which is my second favorite story, which is what Miriam's going to read. Our main character, his name is Hogan, and his job is to connect people. And of course, he's struggling with his own loneliness. And the story, and we were talking about this a little bit, one of the really great things that I think she's done in this collection is she's really elevated her sense of setting. So this the Big Home takes place mostly through the TTY system, which I can't believe that I've never ever in my life come across a story that hasn't taken place inside that. So that's where, if you're deaf or hard of hearing, the TTY is when you call in and someone I guess not translates, but communicates for you. And it's just like such a ripe place for miscommunication. So people in this collection are trying to save themselves, save their marriages through rebus puzzles. People are sitting in actual sweat lodges trying to fix themselves, just desperate to avoid the simplest answer to their problems. There's an uncomfortable baby shower, which I think is the best and only kind of baby shower, is when someone is kind of fallen apart in the background. And Don't Leave Me, which is another favorite story. Our girl Allison is kind of 2 or 3 or 4 steps away from the brink, which is another really great tension building. They're not falling, these people aren't falling, but they're at a place in their lives where they could. And I think that's really interesting. So the tension building is great. The setting is just super elevated and precise. And so I'm so happy that I got to read this story, study this collection, and now Miriam is going to read a little bit for us.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's so nice. It's such a gift to hear someone talk about your writing. So thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. And thank you, Shasta and Chloe, for having us. Okay, how do I make my own speaker view? I don't know, so I'm just not going to worry about it. Okay, I'm going to read from the story Stephanie was just talking about, which is Big Home. This is a story that takes place, a relay operator who connects hard of hearing folks with the other people they're talking to on the phone. And this collection gathers stories I've written many years ago and stories I've written really recently. And this is the one story that I wrote a couple decades ago that I updated, because when I originally wrote it, TTY operators were essential because we weren't in the age of cell phones. But when I went back and read it, it was so anachronistic. I was like, who even needs a TTY operator anymore? We just text, or we all text. And so some of those updates are in here. I'm just going to read a brief snippet. So the TTY operator, Hogan, falls in love with one of the people that he is relaying for, and this is their first phone call. He met Lily on a Tuesday, statistically the slowest day at the call center. Hogan was packing old file folders, paperweights for an office move in August. All you have to do, Marcus had announced this morning, delivering a stack of boxes to Hogan's cubicle, is pack. We take care of the rest. Marcus was a company man. Hogan considered himself a company man too, his tenure triple Marcus's, though Marcus was militantly upbeat in a way that made Hogan gnash something. His teeth? It felt deeper than his teeth. This was Hogan's second move with TRS. The first offices had been airy and light-filled. There had been snack machines in the lobby and a break room. Now the coffee pot sat on the desk in one of the empty cubicles. He had to go to the bathroom sink to fill the carafe. Hogan was taking down postcards from his best friend Leon when the TTY machine trilled. Leon had worked for years in the next cubicle, back before smartphones and WhatsApp and SMS. He'd moved to England with his wife shortly after being laid off, a turn of events that was never not surprising to Hogan. Up and moving to England was the kind of thing people did in a Netflix series. It was the kind of thing college kids did, or young single ladies. A quick row of 10 numbers appeared now on the TTY's LCD screen. Hogan recognized the area code as Monterey, and when he called, a man answered in a gravelly voice, as if he'd just woken at nearly 2 in the afternoon. Hogan announced, "California Relay Services, I have a call from a hearing-impaired party." "From Lily?" the man said, clearing his throat, then coughing. "From Lily?" Hogan typed into the TTY machine. He was struck immediately by the loveliness of the name. Though of course he didn't comment. It was forbidden for relay operators to participate. "Who else?" the TTY caller typed back. "Miss my ass or what?" Hogan recited the words verbatim. The man laughed, then said, "Sure as hell do. What do you think?" And Hogan typed, "I think you wish I was next to you right now, naked in your bed," Lily said. Hogan could feel a light flush of embarrassment as he spoke the words, though he was a professional. He'd been a relay operator for 11 years and understood how quickly he, as a person, with independent thoughts and feelings became invisible to callers. Most callers, however, didn't talk like this. Conversations were brief, stripped of pleasantry and chit-chats, especially on the day shift. Day shift meant business hours. To Aegis Assisted Living, I'd like to set up a tour, please. To Oak Ridge Elementary, second grader out with strep. But Lily and the man, whose name turned out to be plainly Thomas, talked for a full 27 minutes, meandering through a broad range of topics, from Lily wondering if she should get a nose job to the last time Thomas came to see her and left a wet spot the size of a bowling ball in the middle of her bed. I believe you're the one who left that, Thomas said. I'm bored, Lily said at one point. My nipples are hard. Hogan found her disarming and refreshing, and he pictured her as a redhead. He imagined a sleekness to her features, the confident maturity of having been around the block a time or two, but not in a slutty way, a liberated way. Bye, babe, she typed simply without warning or apology soon after Thomas finished a long story about his dog throwing up on the carpet. Love you, doll, Thomas said, and Hogan found a quick, throaty thrill in the typing. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening. I would like to talk now about something I might say. I had read a really brief snippet that turned out to be the very last pages of this and a short story of Stephanie's when I asked her to be in conversation with me for this, because I just had there was a sense and a sensibility to her writing that felt very familiar to me. And then when I read this nonfiction chapbook, so Stephanie's a fiction writer who, well, she's a fiction and nonfiction writer, but I think primarily identifies as a fiction writer. But this is a nonfiction chapbook that also a slim volume that packs a punch. Something I might say is the story of the death of Stephanie's father, followed really quickly by the decline and death of her grandmother. And what is done so skillfully in these essays is renders the complications of grief and death into profoundly different relationships. There is her father is dying of lung cancer after a life of smoking and drinking and largely being absent, and essentially a failed father in a lot of ways, as you'll hear in some snippets. And her grandmother was her person. So Stephanie is able to render these contrasting deaths so beautifully, but neither is without complications. So her father is with complications because of the really tough nature of the relationship between Stephanie, not just Stephanie and her father, but Stephanie and herself, because she's the caregiver, the mediator, the make everything okay in her family. And this is a situation she can't make okay. And then with her grandmother, a whole different other set of complications that come with dementia and having to trick her grandmother into moving to Arizona, and also COVID. So the death of a relative when all of the separations and enforced boundaries that came with COVID were happening. So Stephanie really leans into the complications. It's essentially a collection of essays about the impossibility of death, but rendered in two ways that are so different. It's quite beautiful and moving. So I want to start, I'm going to ask Stephanie a question and then ask her to read something. I think one of my favorite parts of the book is the opening, when her father essentially on his deathbed, whispers regrets. Does he have any regrets? Does Stephanie have any regrets? And she starts the book with, we're 5 lines in, with a lie. I did not and do not have regrets. So it becomes so apparent so quickly that that's not true. It's my question is, why start the collection with a lie? And then I'm going to ask Stephanie to read like one of the things that lays this lie bare just a page and a half later.
Thank you, Miriam. And I would like to echo what you said earlier. It's very wild to hear someone talk about what you've written, because I'm like, oh, did I do that? Well, how exciting. How good for me. Well, okay, so to be honest, I don't know that I thought about it as oh, I'm going to open this with a lie. I'm going to open this. It really was just I actually, it's that obviously it's nonfiction. It truly 100% happened. And I was so taken aback by his question that and like almost insulted, but that I was like, why? Like, how could, oh, I was almost angry. I was like, how could you say that to me? Because like, that's what a cliche. I literally, that was my first thought, was I cannot use this anywhere. It's such a cliche. You can't ask so I think honest to gosh, I just thought it was, I did not think of it as opening with a lie, but then like basically spending the whole book talking about all my regrets. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. I just thought it was a way to get in.
I like that so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, someone once referred to me as fiction that you're building the sculpture, and nonfiction you're like so like fiction you're building it from nothing, and nonfiction you're scraping away from the mound to get to the sculpture. And it feels like something in your, so I was thinking, oh, of all the moments you picked this one. So it's almost like, you know, that whatever you believe about writing is channeling, or I mean, it's such a wonderful moment to open with because it frames the viewer and everything. Because I believed you the first time I read it, because it's like 5 sentences in. I have no reason not to believe you.
Right.
So it just creates a really great dramatic irony throughout it. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, like not even a page and a half later, to read an excerpt about the dress story between Stephanie and her dad.
Sure. Also one more clarification. Or not clarification, but I really genuinely, when I answered him and I said I don't have regrets, I really truly was like, well, this is absolutely not, we're not going to do this. Like, we're not doing this right now. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, well, of course I have regrets. So, because, you know, you do kind of get to a point where you're like, no, I think I'm okay. Like I've done the counseling, I'm all right. And then you never are. Okay. And this is page 3. I always tell the dress story, a microcosm of my father's transgressions. He took me shopping for my freshman year high school homecoming dance. Did not have a date. No one had asked me. I was going with friends. Boys did not like me. They thought I was weird, and I probably was weird. The problem was how much I liked boys, how much I needed their attention. We lived in Lake Havasu, Arizona. Our town had a Walmart and a Kmart, and the pretty girls had their parents drive them to Vegas or Phoenix to buy clothes. My dad took me to a strip mall in town where a shop sold off-brand girls' clothing. I wanted a Jessica McClintock dress. 17 magazine advertised Jessica McClintock dresses, so I believed a Jessica McClintock dress was the key to boys and popularity, and the shop did not sell Jessica McClintock dresses. So I tried on a blue cotton dress with pink flowers, and this was the 1990s when girls wore prints with big flowers on their dresses, which I believe that is back, by the way. And I had a weight problem that wouldn't go away for another 2 years, and I wore a size 12. So I came out of the dressing room and my dad looked me over and said, maybe if you ate apples instead of cookies, that dress would look better on you. New drinking game. Every time your dad destroys your self-esteem, take a shot. Every time someone laughs at the story of how your dad destroyed your self-esteem, take a shot. Every time the story falls flat, take a shot. Find the bad men and tell them the dress story. Listen to them say your dad sounds like an ass. Agree and laugh. Laugh and laugh and laugh. What a fucking asshole. Take a shot. Join Team Mom. Because dad's the reason they got divorced. Feel it in your body. Dad's fault. Dad hurts everything he touches, including himself. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I know, Jocelyn, me too. And then do you want me to do the Murphy bed section too, or?
Sure. Well, yeah, but I
think
want
we're
to
running up on time.
No,
Yep.
I think
No?
no, I think we're good on it.
Okay.
So one of the other things that I really like about how, so the first time I read this, I just read it. And the second time I was thinking about how we're talking about complications. So the first complication is that lie. And then throughout, like you have no easy metaphors. Like every image you pick, like there's nothing, there's no like rose with the petals falling off for death. It's all really complicated. And there's an essay in here called The Murphy Bed, where you're trying to sell off your dad's stuff, and the Murphy bed in his apartment is one item. And I just love how there's nothing easy to take. I'd like you to read the Murphy bed part so everyone can see how it doesn't neatly fit into any narrative about the relationship or regret or death.
Okay, so yes, the Murphy bed. It's like I weirdly feel like saying true story, but the whole thing's a true story. So, okay. During the last weeks of my father's life, when his siblings visited, they slept on the Murphy bed in the back room of my father's house. My husband and I could sell the Murphy bed. I took photographs. We folded it onto the wall out of our way, and I listed it on Craigslist for $200. I didn't know that Murphy beds were as much as they were, just FYI, which is within the hour, I was flooded with messages. I set up appointments for a Saturday, but when we arrived to my father's house that Saturday morning, we found the Murphy bed in pieces. We hadn't latched it correctly, we guessed. The sound of the bed coming off the wall and splintering must have been terrifying. I sent a text to the woman who I knew was on her way, and I told her the truth. My father died, the Murphy bed fell off the wall, and was now unsellable. And the woman said, "No problem." She was sorry about my dad. "Thank you for letting me know," she said. I'm not trying to be forward, but maybe your dad didn't want you to sell it. My father's ghost might have pushed the Murphy bed off the wall. I can't imagine he had a connection to the Murphy bed because he barely had a connection to his daughters. Maybe, I wrote to the woman. Too many exclamation points, but such were the times. My husband and I hauled the pieces of the bed into the garage where the junk pile was growing. Making a junk pile inside a dead person's house felt immoral. You're providing a commentary on their life and their worth. This is garbage. This is not. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, I truly didn't know until maybe even recently. So I'm working on a fictionalized-ish version of this currently, and I was like, oh, and then I looked at Murphy beds because they sell for thousands of dollars. So that I was absolutely overwhelmed with the amount of people who wanted this bed for $200, and I thought, wow, how exciting! But yeah, it's because it turns out they're very expensive, and we broke it and we couldn't sell it. So yes, good times.
I think that's interesting about how you talked about characters operating in the can't. Is that what you said?
Yes. Yes.
Because I think we're both doing that. Like, I think what is,
Yes.
well, we're not, I think you asked me in, a conversation leading up to this, like, what was I writing for? Was that the question? Like,
Well, I asked you what you were trying to put out.
oh, right. What you're trying to,
Yeah, as in extinguish, I guess, but also as in it's both. It's like, what are you trying to like extinguish, but also what are you trying to by extinguishing, because you have to get it out there, like it has to go it has to go somewhere. So like, yeah.
that's such a good question. And like the extinguish is so interesting. Because yeah, I think I'm not interested in that. I'm much more interested in the mess than the solution to the mess, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like
Yeah.
I'm a little bit interested. I get more and more interested. Like I have some amorphous feeling that parenthood makes me more interested in cleaning up the mess. I think because in parenthood, I have a 14-year-old. You don't want to just make a mess. You want to also clean. You don't want parenting to all be can't. You hope there's some can in there. But some sort of emotional truth in the mess, I think, is what I'm trying to put out there in the put it into the world sense. But maybe that's also what I'm trying to extinguish. Maybe it's like self-soothing to be like the mess itself can have truth in it. The mess can be real because
Yeah.
that's what we're all doing in our lives too, is making a lot of messes. I mean, it's funny when you're writing because I'm like, isn't that a universal sensibility? And then like a reviewer wrote how everyone was disaffected they said like this is very post Perry Trump because everyone's so disaffected. And I was like, oh, I thought they were just like doing their thing. I didn't think of them as disaffected.
Oh, somebody's I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe some people are disaffected. I just read it because this is how this is what I look for, is just people trying to trying to hold on to something, trying to connect to something, trying to but just making it worse.
Yeah.
But like again, it's not like although there was in Big Home there was an actual physical mess with the neighbor.
Mhm.
That which was a lot. Yeah, I disaffected. I don't think so. I mean, yeah, but no.
Yeah.
And I do the same thing with that. I'm very like, oh, I'm a writer and I do a lot of therapy and I talk to a lot of people and da, 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 da. So this to me, I'm just like, oh yeah, no, this is just normal. I don't
Yeah.
know.
This is like two authors who make messes being like, no, your people are fine. They're not
I know,
disaffected
you're
at
fine. They're
all.
fine. They're fine. Well, and so so Miriam has a story in this book. And the inside of it that takes place in a like sweat lodge. In a for which is if you want to, and this is something Sarah Lippman has talked about, but cranking the heat on people, putting the heat on people, and then it literally is happening, and just like what you see rise in each of these characters, like quote unquote, nothing is happening. There's not like, it's not like no one's like swooping in with a cape, or no one's like, it really is all happening like inside their heads. And I think it's a really good example of a story where something can happen in your head, and she's done this really nice job of an external heat while something's happening in your head that just makes the whole it's just such a, I don't know, it's such a great little story.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Again, from like also from a craft perspective, it's just like, oh, yeah, duh, that's how you solve that problem. When you say nothing's happening, you put them in a sweat lodge. I mean, yeah, so
Thank you. Okay, so what about I feel like the other tension that you set up so well that's rife for complication is you as the caregiver role in your family, like the whole trying but failing, like grasping toward connection that you set up. You're not there when your dad dies. You go home to sleep in your own bed. And you aren't there when your grandmother dies because it's COVID and you can't be there. So I wonder if you could just talk about, the trying but failing aspect. I always wonder in nonfiction, right, how much of this was you trying to figure out that, I guess I just want you to speak to the tension about caregiver role, the mediator, the make everything better role in the family, and your inability to do that successively with both of these deaths.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of it was just circumstantial. I would have loved to have been there when my grandma passed away.
Yeah.
And I like envisioned that, like, especially after my dad, I wasn't there, and I think that was all right. And I think I mentioned this but like the caregiver, I had a caregiver also. She was like, some people want to die alone, and I think my dad probably wanted to do that. But I think my grandma probably didn't, and I still feel really bad about that. I feel really guilty about that. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things where like I have a weird I have a hard sense of control that I couldn't control any of that, nor can anybody during that time. So that was just really destabilizing, I guess. I don't know if that answered the question.
No,
Yeah.
That's what I think comes across, the idea of, wanting to control all of the situations and there being no control to be had.
Yeah,
and your dad trying to control, like saying, I'm not going to say I was a smoker. I'm going to say I quit 20 years ago in a doctor's appointment, which is like very like a moment of, like, I really felt for him in that moment because it was such folly. And of course, like the doctor's like, you have the lungs of a lifelong smoker.
Oh, right.
And like, as if it's going to make any difference to his mortality if he can trick the doctor into thinking anyway.
Speaking of control, he just wanted to, I think he just didn't want the judgment. It was like, too late. I've judged you. Like,
right. Yeah. And that regrets question is probably the same thing. He wants to be, he doesn't want his children judging him either. He wants it to be okay. He wants to not be judged.
Yeah. I have a question for you. I've never published a short story collection. I have attempted to, and in my attempts, I spend lots and lots of time trying to order the stories. And I am very curious what your process was in ordering these stories. Because it kind of, like, the opening made sense. I mean, it all makes sense, but I'm like, oh, that's a great opening because, I don't know. How did you do that? What was your process, or was there one?
Yeah, there was a process. The biggest organizing principle for me is that 5 of the stories were new and 4 of the stories were older. So that was one piece. And then 5 of the stories were longer and 4 were shorter. So I wanted to intermix that. And I also knew the one dealing with death and grief, I wanted to go last. Like, I sort of wanted to do life cycle-y. So the funny thing is, the first story is called Little Girl, and that's a story that I wrote. That's the earliest story in the collection, and it won me an award, and then it won me a fellowship. And then I went to the fellowship and had writer's block for 9 months because I was like, I've written my one good story. I'll never write anything as good. And so, so Little Girl's the first story in here, but when I submitted this to Propeller, the second story is called Carker, and that was like had the fanciest literary journal publication. So I put that one first because I was like, enough with Little Girl already. It's already gotten me so much. I've written other good stories. So I put Carker first, submitted it, and the only feedback Dan, my publisher, had about the story collection, he's like, Carker's good. Why did you put it first? And I was like, because it was in the Georgia Review. And he said, Little Girl is like Little Girl draws people in. It's like much more
Absolutely.
And I was like, at that point, I was like, I'm just gonna give it up for Little Girl and all the gifts this story has given me, and it ended up going first.
Give it up for Little Girl. Well, I feel that way too. Like I have two, because this was an essay in the Sun, and then this essay turned into this book, and I wouldn't have had this book without that essay. And I'm still going with it because I'm still like my work in progress right now is a novel version based off my short story that's also about dead dads. So like that's
a novel version of your Pithead Chapel story?
Yeah.
That's exciting. Everybody go read that story. You can look it up online, pitheadchapel.com.
It's well, yeah, so it's about but I wanted to change it up a little bit because yeah, you're just like, well, how far does this regrets gonna go? Well, turns out go for a while. And then I see Chloe has a question. And actually this will kind of answer Chloe's question too, is my story in Pithead Chapel, which is loosely based on this, it's called Dead Dads Anonymous, and it's about a pretend support group for people whose dads have passed away, but whose dads were not the best. And the choices are, and I talked about this, I was at a conference last summer where I was like, I brought the first couple chapters and I was like, what am I doing here? But there's I think there's an emotional truth that you can get to in fiction that you can't necessarily get to in nonfiction, which sounds weird. It sounds like it should be the other way around. But I can't go as far in my nonfiction that I can in my fiction. So with certain emotional relationships, like my dad's gone, like obviously he's passed away, which is what this is about, but I would not write about my dad if he was alive. I just wouldn't do it. So, because it's just too awkward. So yeah, I don't know. I guess, emotional truth, and I think that's the beauty in fiction. And then I think also that's the beauty in, Miriam's stories is it just hits, each story just hits, it's a really hard emotional truth that you just, I don't know, for me, you just can't always get there. Like, and just to plug for whatever reason, if anyone's read Matt Bell's Refuse to Be Done, there's a bit in there about the logic on the page, and in fiction, it's all about like letting the reader make their own connections and logic, and you let the reader get to their own truth. Like they find something in themselves that they connect to in your fiction. And but in nonfiction, it's all logic. It's all your own logic. So it's a lot of deciding, I don't know, what is true and what is not. And sometimes what is true is not true in fiction, if that makes any sense. I don't know.
And then you're like, right, you create the scaffolding in nonfiction. It's interesting about where is like, it's an interesting question about where to locate the emotional truth, because don't you think my memoirist friend would say, oh, nonfiction is like the truthiest truth, because that's what she
Yeah.
because that's what she treads in most of the time. Like you, I mean, it seems like there's so many emotional truths in something I might say, but I know you joked about your family not being here. There's like those limits of the characters are around. Like you have to tread a little bit more carefully with the characters who are not here. Right. I also find so much more freedom in fiction, even if like there are pieces of it that are, there's always pieces of yourself in it, I think.
Yeah. Well, and like in your story in Don't Leave Me, which I sidebar emailed you about, that I would absolutely wear that t-shirt also. Yeah, it's first person. And that's so yeah, so you have Little Girl's first person, Don't Leave Me is first person. I followed her and her logic, and I was like, kind of, it's that sort of like, what are you doing? What are you doing? But she's also at the same time, and I don't want to like spoil the story, so I'm trying to like frame it.
It's a
She's
woman
doing all these
who
things. Yeah, she's doing all these things, and but she also is at the same time, it's very obvious like what she wants and needs, but she can't get there. And then, she's got this shirt on, and you're just like, it's right there. It's everything you need is right there. And she, is just I don't know, can't get there in her head, but she's kind of there, but she's not all the way. I don't know.
This is a character who, with her best friend, they make Don't Leave Me t-shirts. They think it's this brilliant idea, black print on red t-shirts, and then they kind of forget about it, and then the best friend goes off and gets involved in a serious relationship, stranding the narrator, who then ends up wearing the Don't Leave Me t-shirt to a blind date that her best friend and new boyfriend set up for her. I mean, I so love the sense of it's right there, can't you just see it? Because that really does resonate for me, like in life too. Like I'm someone who does a lot of thrashing and, questioning and giving myself grief about a lot of stuff, when the reality is, can't you just see, like, stop? Can't you just, like, that's sort of my experience of humanness. Stop, can't you just see it?
Yeah. And
I
I
don't know
think,
if
and
that resonates for you.
Shasta has a question for you, Miriam, which I think kind of just even plays on what you're talking about.
So Shasta, I'm curious how your writing has changed over the years, particularly since this collection includes stories written over decades. Oh yeah, Stephanie, this is what I was going to say to you. Great that you're still treading in this territory in fiction now. I think the thing that I realized is that the forms that my stories have taken, like I'm interested a lot more informally playing around with stories. There are different structures in my later stories that are playing with form, are experimenting with like what a story is. But I'm asking the exact same questions, like how do we connect? How do we see clearly what's going on? How do we get into and out of our messes? And I was capable of writing a happy ending for one of the later stories, but I was sort of both heartened and a little bit like, that they like, when I sent it to the editor at Propeller, he couldn't tell which ones were old and which ones were new. Like that. So on one hand, I think, oh, really? My writing hasn't changed in 20 years. But I think it's that my writing has changed. I think it's that it's the same. I'm still asking the same questions. I haven't gotten any of this figured out in 20 years. And I think of Cheryl Strayed, who, the material in Wild, she was writing about in essays for years and years. So every one of us who'd been reading her, we were like, oh, look, she put her essays in novel form. And her novel before in memoir form, her novel before Wild was the same. Like she covers the same subject matter in all these different ways. to great success. So I think we're
Yeah.
all always asking the same questions. And Stephanie, I saw a question for you too in there.
Oh yeah. That's funny you bring up Cheryl Strayed, because I've also been like, oh, should I let the dad stuff go? Which she didn't. It's her mom, but
She did not let the mom stuff go.
you can't let it go because it doesn't leave you. That's why. It's,
Right.
How I approach the writing and where you deliberate. That's so interesting. My mom would be devastated to hear it phrased like that. For genuinely, my genuine answer to that is the last few years of my dad's life, like he was an alcoholic, he wasn't around, I was angry, and then he had so many health issues, and he just became, for for lack of a better, he just became a sad, sick older man who just kind of suddenly was just like, oh, now I'm going to be I need you. And he never directly said that to me, but he did. So I think there's probably I had some forgiveness while he was alive, and then I don't know, I think I've spent so much of my life just so angry at him, and then just like watching him just disintegrate was like, oh, he's whatever broke him, I don't know. I think I just kind of started to feel bad for him, I guess. But still angry.
I think, Jocelyn, someone wrote something about that tension between elder care and caring for your own child. And you had a line
yes.
early on in these essays that, that right before the dress story, where you say, give them more than they gave you when you're talking about caretaking a parent. So this idea, I don't know, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so my daughter was 4 when he died. But he started having health issues a couple years before that. So he was having issues for a couple years. So yeah, trying to like becoming a parent was I don't know. That was obviously transformative in a lot of ways, but a lot of like stuff reopened, and yeah, I don't know. I think multitasking isn't like a real thing. So I think I probably wasn't there for my daughter as much as I should have been, because I was trying to take care of, I was trying to like take care of my dad, because really I just wanted him to take care of me or something like that. But yeah, it was not the best of times. It was not the best of times. So
yeah. And that idea of like giving people more than they can give you, just the negotiating, it reminds me of Lori Moore's Who Can Run the Frog Hospital, when she near the end says like, it's never, you're giving to people who aren't necessarily giving to you, but then they're giving, and then the other, like that the giving and the receiving are rarely symmetrical. And I'm really into that idea because it's messy.
Yeah, well, and then like, and I said this to you, sidebar too, and I'm not to keep coming back to the little girl, but it's such a great story. As I said to you in our earlier conversation, like the main character, I loved her voice, yes, but it was Polly, who I was just so like, oh, like I would read in a heartbeat a follow-up Polly story. Like, with Polly's 35, what's happening? Where is she? What's she doing? Right? Because and again, like that's it is a dad story. So like I'm always into the dad stories, but it's another sort of the main character, the narrator is kind of one thing, but then these peripheral people are just so well rendered in the background that you're just like, man, I hope she's okay. I don't know if she is.
I'm not
She
sure,
is.
right. Everyone's okayness, I sort of write against everybody's okayness, you know?
Yes.
That
Yes.
Star asked a good question. You've both been writing for a long time, and Miriam mentioned at least a 9-month writer's block. How have you both managed to keep writing through it all? That's such a good question, Star. I think my belief at this point in my career and watching all my friends' careers is like the only ones of us who are still writing are the ones who really love the writing itself. Which isn't to say it's easy, but like the process is the thing. As exciting as like publication and these conversations and reading other people's publications is, the writing is the thing. And I have said that parenthood has really disabused me of writer's block because writing becomes the scarcity. You're like, you no longer have the, you're, and with a teenager, I'm finally starting to get back into like, oh my God, I have time for this. But time has been the biggest, time, not writer's block, has become the difficulty now.
Yeah, I would answer that question with like a big, I have no idea, because it's actually a really painful, often painful, and I don't just mean the publishing side of it, because that is its own set of things, but I think what I am trying to do in my burgeoning middle age here is really just like I've tried to let go of a lot of the expectation that I used to have about what I'm writing and where it's going. And just I have all the sadness, and it's got to go somewhere, and that's where it's going. So I don't know. I just like I'm in constant, I don't know, constant emotional distress. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Publishing is
Maybe.
such a different beast than writing. I mean, they
It's
couldn't be
it's
more
two separate,
different.
yeah, it's two separate things. And like people, this I've been 20 years. I have two failed novels. Is anything ever failed? I don't know. I could definitely revise one of them. The other one, I don't know. And then, this kind of comes out of nowhere. So it's just like, and I'm working on a third one because I hate myself. I don't know. I don't know. It's a completely different thing though. It's a completely different beast.
And like, the other choice is to not write. And that feels, I feel like the people who continue to write are the ones for whom not writing is worse.
Yeah, I personally have no other skill set, and I truly don't. Like I can talk about myself and process my sadness in therapy, and I can put a couple sentences together. So I have no other skills. Like I can't my dad would always encourage me to go to like a trade school. Like I graduated from college, and he was like, "Well, maybe you should get like a plumbing, maybe you should become a plumber," and I was like, "Ah, how dare you?" But probably he was right. Like they make money and have steady work. So, I have no other skill. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to work in an office and I'm going to write my little stories. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or teach a class. Now I'm teaching classes again. We'll see, so I don't know. It just does. And Miriam, so you have a novel coming next year also.
I do have a novel coming next year. I feel like, oh, everything in publishing works out only because I'm sitting where I am now. But had you talked to me, it was 15 years between my first and second book. And I had a lot of gnashing and moaning. And so I have a novel, Closer, coming out from Regal Publishing House, which I'm not sure if one of the Brown Bag Lit co-founders would like to also talk about their upcoming Regal House publication before they officially announce it. But yeah, so June 3rd of 2025, I have a novel coming out.
1 year from today.
Oh my
That's
God, 1 year from
exciting.
today.
1 year from today.
That's so
Oh my
exciting.
gosh, like, yeah. And what is that based on? Are any of the, nothing, just completely different?
It's based on Eugene, Oregon. It takes place, it's a community,
Oh,
community, and it takes place in Horace, Oregon.
I
town.
have a friend who lives in Eugene.
You do?
How fun.
How
Yeah.
have we not discussed this?
Oh, I don't know. She teaches high school. Her name is Kate.
Huh. Okay, we'll sidebar this conversation.
We'll sidebar. We'll
That's
sidebar.
exciting. So it's based on a
Yes.
real place. And it is like a incident between Black and white students happened in the school library, and then it has ripples out into the community.
Can't wait. Pre-order.
Me too. I can't wait to read
Smash that pre-order button.
it.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here,
Yes.
for asking questions. Thank you, Stephanie, for being in conversation. Thank you again, Shasta and Chloe.
Thank you
Yes,
both.
yes,
Incredible.
thank you. Thank you so much. This is awesome. Miriam's the best. I can't wait to meet you in real life someday. Maybe AWP. I don't know.
WP, LA.
Yes.
Thank you to everyone for attending. Please, if you haven't already, go buy their books. They're really, really good. I promise you.